Hi, I'm Brian Horn, editor of Lawn and Landscape Magazine. Thanks for joining us today for the webinar Economy Proof Your Lawn Business, Proven Tactics from Industry Veterans. Before we get started, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Zoom interface, and I will field those throughout the webinar and we'll ask those at the end. Also, we will send a copy of this webinar to all registrants probably in a week or so, so keep an eye out for that. Some background on our panelists today. Mike Carden, Senior Product Manager, has been with RealGreen since 2010 and has served in a variety of roles, helping companies across all verticals in the green industry, with footprints varying from owner-operator to national franchise brands. Since 2020, Mike has been the Product Manager for Service Assistant, working to cement the vision and direction for Service Assistant. Joe McPhail is Vice President Franchises, and he joined RealGreen Systems in 1989 and has worked with every size and type of service company. During his over 30 years in the industry, he has worked closely with many of the industry's largest corporate organizations, leading franchise organizations, and some of the industry's largest independent organizations. Nick Morrie, franchise business consultant, has been with Spring Green Lawn Care for 22 years. He started as a lawn technician, performing the various services that Spring Green offers. He moved into a management position in 2013 and finally settled on the corporate side in 2017, working with franchise owners to ensure their continued growth. And with that, Mike, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us here. Early summer afternoon on a Tuesday, so appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us about this, and learn about this very important subject, especially right now, economy proofing your lawn business. As Brian already introduced us, got Joe McPhail, obviously our VP of franchises here, RealGreen by WorkWave. I'm Mike Carden, Senior Product Manager on the RealGreen brand here at WorkWave. And then joining us, we've got Nick Morrie, again, our Spring Green franchise business consultant. So excited to share all the content with you guys today. And again, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in to the question and answer section. We'll go ahead and have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you for joining us. As we talk through the agenda a little bit, we've already talked about intros, but ultimately double click on why does this conversation matter right now? Obviously, why you're here and probably interested in why this conversation matters right now. Joe McPhail will do kind of a look back at his 40 years of experience in the green industry. He's obviously seen a number of things in those years and various stages of economic uncertainty and macroeconomic situations. We'll turn it over to Nick. Nick will give a rundown of some of Spring Green's recipe for success. I will touch on sort of some of the things we can do to strengthen our tech stack and some of the various tools we can use to help economy proof our business. And then we'll go through a roundtable Q&A session and a quick wrap up. Pretty nice and useful quote. Frankly, that was really published by the Harvard Business Review right out of the Great Recession there in late 2008, 2009, and 2010. But progressive companies stay closely connected to customer needs. It's a powerful filter through which to make investment decisions. So again, our customer needs and ultimately, macroeconomic, environment ultimately dictates the investments that we as business owners make. So I'd really encourage you'll get a copy of this presentation in several days. Certainly review that article in the Harvard Business Review. It's pretty topical even today. Pretty interesting stuff there. Why does this conversation matter now? Well, the number of sort of common threads and common themes around economic downturns. What's interesting is we can turn those down, some of those challenges and sort of flip the lens and view those also as opportunities to help grow our business, to help become more efficient. So as we look at some of the common challenges, right, a drop in residential demand, consumers likely more focused on how they're spending, right, less likely that they're going to be in a manic buying phase, if you will. And the same goes for commercial customers, right? Commercial accounts tighten up their budgets, right? They get a little bit more disciplined on how they're allocating their budget and their spend across all divisions and really all facets of their organization. uh, as you're sort of looking to economy proof your business, become more efficient, right? Utilize tools to become more efficient. So is your competition. So it's likely that you'll see an increase in competition in your market, right? As business owners that run similar businesses will basically should be trying to do the same things that you're trying to do. There's always the opportunity, always the reality of possibly some cash flow stress, right? As you might see an increase in customer churn, right? Again, goes back to residential customers and commercial customers really, evaluating their budget and sort of scrutinizing their spend. And there's also labor challenges, right? Not uncommon to see technicians or crews, members or crew leads, high amount of turnover during these times in economic uncertainty, right? So ideally, we're taking those common threads among the challenges that we might see here in times of economic uncertainty, turn those into opportunities, right? So we can really strengthen our customer loyalty by taking several actions, right? Part of that's communication, which we'll talk about here in some of the content. Opportunity to consolidate across the market, right? If you're in acquisition mode or just plainly in customer acquisition mode, right? You have the ability to start looking across your market and saying, where are the areas that we might be able to penetrate through, both in the white space in your existing customer base, but also outside of your white space into new markets or among other businesses in your market. Obviously, the ability and sort of longingness to increase efficiency, right? With economic uncertainty, a lot of times we're looking to become more efficient to reduce overhead, reduce cost. So that's a great opportunity in times of economic uncertainty. Obviously, shifting to recurring revenue, which will be a pretty big focus point of some of this, some of the content in this presentation, right? How can we make sure that the revenue that we're bringing in from our customers is as much of a recurring model as possible? So things like introducing new service lines that are recurring or expanding your upsell capabilities to recurring revenue. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the labor challenges and labor shortages. Also could be, a nice opportunity to evaluate the available, labor opportunities that are out there. Are there, senior technicians, crew leads, crew members that can come onto the organization and really make an impact, help teams become more efficient, so on and so forth. So timely discussion points here. We're going to get into a little bit more of the content next up with Joe McPhail with some of the things that he's seen over his time in the green industry. Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I can hardly believe it's been this long that I've been doing this in the industry. But one thing I can tell you is that, in economic downturns, what I've seen in the industry is our software business sees more interest, right? And that's a direct reflection of companies that are trying to be more efficient, trying to optimize their business, do more with less, right? So what they do is they look to automation. They look to see how they can improve their marketing, right? One of the things that Mike touched base on is being more profitable. Well, one of the ways you're being more profitable is to grow your density in neighborhoods. So instead of marketing to a whole zip code, focus your marketing on zip codes or neighborhoods rather, where you already have customers. Increase that density, which then reduce your overall costs and increases your profitability. Focus on upsells to your customers, but don't blanket them with things. Instead, focus on upsells that solve real problems. Increase your communication with your customers, right? Build that relationship. And then a homeowner that's in an economic downturn, we saw it in 2008, we saw it in 2020, the invention of the staycation, right? As people found economic downturns, they're concerned about their finances. Instead of taking trips and going out, they start paying attention to their home, right? As housing markets get sketchy, people will invest in making their house look better to hold that value, right? So as a lawn care company, these are opportunities for us, right, to target those customers, help your customer by showing them the value that you're bringing them, and you're not just upselling them. So that's one of the things that I think we need to focus on here. And those are, some of the things that I've noticed. also what I've noticed is the companies that sit back and who get timid in an economic downturn are the ones that struggle. The ones who are looking for how can we improve, how can we be more efficient, right? Those are the companies that are looking to improve their business in these downturns. Those are the ones that come out of them the best, right? The ones that sit back and pull back their marketing, pull back on investment in the business, those are the companies that tend to struggle as they're coming out of it, right? One of the things that Joe Cusick taught me, Joe Cusick was the founder of RealGreen, and many people in the industry have benefited from his wisdom. But one of the things that Joe always pushed with us is take care of your customer and they will take care of you, right? If you solve your customer's problem, then they will, you grow your customer's business, they will grow your business, right? That was our motto. And he really believed firmly in reoccurring revenue. And the reason for that is because it's such an asset. It sets up your business to be successful the following year. Companies that do landscape design build, those companies have to resell those customers every year, right? But a company that's doing reoccurring revenue, whether it be lawn care, tree care, mosquito, those customers, you've got a base to start your next season with. And so to get to a 10% growth, you don't have to sell 100% first and then grow 10%. You just need to outpace your cancels and grow that additional 10%. So retaining those customers is much more cost effective, right? And literally I had to coach Joe. We used to do this thing at RealGreen where our customers would come in and we do a training thing where the customers would go on and meet with each department, and each company would sit down with Joe Cusick for an hour and talk. And multiple times over the years, Joe would be telling this guy, a business owner, to shut down part of his business or quit focusing on mowing and maintenance and focus more on the part of his business that's reoccurring revenue. And he firmly believed it. And I'd have to explain to Joe, I'm like, Joe, hey, you can't lecture these guys. They're our customers, they're business owners, they're allowed to do what they want to do. He's like, no, they don't understand. You gotta build that reoccurring revenue. It's really important. It helps you grow your business. We had a customer who just recently celebrated their 30th year in business. And when they started with us, they were doing about $200,000 or $300,000 a year in revenue. He came to his first users conference with us. And at the users conference, talked to Joe Cusick, sat in a conversation about reoccurring revenue, called his buddy back in Michigan and said, hey, I want you to buy my landscape maintenance business, which was about half of his revenue, sold it to his buddy over the phone, and then dedicated his business to doing just lawn fertilization and reoccurring revenue. His business now, he now has 3 businesses, and those businesses do over $5 million a year in revenue. So, and he attributes that to Joe Cusick and convincing him the importance on focusing on that reoccurring revenue and the better margins that he saw in doing lawn fertilization over lawn maintenance. So that's what we want to focus on. We want to focus on how can we help our customers grow, prioritize being more efficient, prioritize tightening your marketing up, being more efficient with it. And really that's, that helps you build resiliency in your business, right? It helps you be prepared. When you turn the corner, go through the next season, you're ready to go. You've got those customers coming back. So again, the key there is to focus on communications with your customers, driving efficiency, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in your routing, whatever it happens to be. Look at the areas of the business. Where can we be tighter? Where can we be more efficient? And focus on the customer. That's the number one thing. And with that, Nick, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Today, I'm going to focus on discussing the key things to point at when you're wanting to keep your business in the right direction during times of economic uncertainty. And the first thing that comes to my mind is keeping the customers that you have, much like Joe said. And it seems So simple, but many marketing dollars are spent replacing customers. First year customer turnover is a real thing. And during times of economic uncertainty, homeowners typically spend more time at home and in their yards. So they're looking at things probably a little closer than they would any other time. They want to protect that investment. So we need to be way more proactive than reactive when it comes to lawn issues and customer concerns. For me, that starts with setting realistic expectations from the start of the relationship. As we know, some lawns cannot be turned into a golf course in 1 year. And I think it's best to be transparent about that. One thing Spring Green strives to do is to get in front of that through our contact center. They're going to be the ones that take the that inbound call and try to close the sale. So when that sale is closed, the call center has a rating system for new customers, and it's very simple. It asks them to rate their lawn on a scale of 1 to 5, and it asks where they want their lawn to be by the end of the year. These notes get added to the invoice. So when a technician gets to a new lawn and sees the customer thinks their lawn is a 1, but wants it to be a 5 by the end of the year, and they live next to an open field potentially or something, the technician knows they need to reset those expectations. Another thing we need to do is show value for the services that we provide. So one way Spring Green does this is through a comprehensive property evaluation. So all new customers are required to receive a property evaluation during their first year, but some franchise owners choose to do them on all customers every single year. This is a great way to get in front of any issues and to offer solutions before those issues get out of control. Again, showing value for the service. It's a great upsell tool, and it's a great retention tool. Spring Green also sends out mid-season and year-end customer satisfaction surveys. Best practice here is to ask your brand advocates, meaning the ones who rate you highly, to leave a review on Google, Yelp, and Facebook. And we know if you ask 100 people to do that, probably only a handful will. So you really got to be diligent about asking when those come through. And as we all know, the ratings are huge nowadays. When I buy something online, I'm checking the ratings. And yeah, I'm not necessarily taking into account the very worst ones or the very best ones. It's somewhere in the middle. The ones that rate you low obviously have service issues, and those need to be addressed. Do not leave them hanging. That's probably the worst thing you can do to a customer that's raising their hand with a service issue, is to not answer it. That is a guaranteed cancel at some point down the line. Make it so that step 2 is going to be to diversify your services. Make it worthwhile to go out and service those customers. So Spring Green offers lawn services, tree services, and as of 4 years ago, pest services. We are slowly rolling this out to the system as it can be intimidating to franchise owners that have done lawn care only. But the beauty of this is that in many cases, pest services are not a want, but they are a need. You need to get control over whatever that pest is doing to your home. There's a minimal marketing spend here, as those locations already have a customer list to work and call. And when they call in for lawn issues, you can just ask the question, are you interested in pest control, or do you have any pest issues? We have also put a ton of focus onto spending more time getting the system comfortable with identifying and diagnosing tree issues. There's definitely been a bit of a void there. People, and I think it's just intimidation over diagnosing even what the tree is before what the problem is. But we have a long-term employee here who trees is his passion, and we're sending him out to the individual locations to try to get them more comfortable with any of those tree issues. We also offer irrigation services, which include installs, startups, and general maintenance. And ultimately what we're trying to do here is make it so your customers aren't jumping from provider to provider between all of those different services. And when that technician drives to a property, he can do as many of those services as his truck can do and as the equipment on his truck can do. Again, make it worthwhile to go to those properties and do multiple services on those lawns. It's important. Step 3 is going to be getting flexible with collecting the money. So make it easy for your customers to pay you. It's extremely important to spend less time chasing money for services already completed, so you can spend your valuable time elsewhere. When customers prepay for the year or go on auto pay or installments, they retain much better than pay-as-you-go customers. Auto pay and installment billing is also a great way to keep the customer's monthly payment as low as possible. Some Spring Green locations actually do not accept pay-as-you-go customers anymore. They're few and far in between, but it seems like we're headed in that direction. And then some other Spring Green locations have opted to sell their programs a little differently from the start. So in the South region, they offer their customers a full comprehensive lawn care package. So what that means is for a monthly fee, they will provide everything that the lawn could possibly need. So fertilizer, weed control, disease and insect control as needed, as well as grassy weed control. Those warm season grasses are a different beast, and the locations down there truly believe this is the best way to service their customers. These customers have also retained much better so far. And my step 4 is going to be watch the data closely. So all Spring Green owners are assigned a dedicated business consultant. That is what I do. And we are a second set of eyes on the data. We do business planning every year with a reprojection of that business plan every June. And with the way that prepays come in, as long as they go out on time, they come in pretty regularly, and we have the historical marketing information. With all of that, we are able to arrive at, as well as every other expense in between, we're able to arrive at a pretty accurate cash flow that then gets tidied up in June once we have some real numbers to look at. So we're always working with our franchise owners to find opportunities for growth, whether that is analyzing which zip codes are performing better, to running price discrepancy reports to see variations in what customers are paying, just to ultimately make sure we're profitable. There's no point in doing this if you aren't making money for doing that lawn. When owners are ready to sell, this can make a huge difference. Traditionally, from what I've seen, it seems like larger size lawns are actually underpriced, and those can be bumped up a little bit more. On top of that, watching the season summary regularly to make sure customers aren't being forgotten, as well as keeping that top line revenue, that ultimate goal for the year, real and accurate. On top of that, you also need to use the unserviced list in conjunction with the season summary. Again, just to make sure nobody is slipping through the cracks. It seems like at the end of every year, we missed somebody. Each location missed somebody. And you know what? They spent marketing dollars to pull that person in, and it was all for naught. So it's very important. We are a very data-driven company, and working within RealGreen makes it easy to pull reports and make sure there are no leaky buckets. So to pull it all together quickly, get better at the fundamentals. If the easy things stop being easy, then you have problems. Diversify your services and how your customers are able to pay for those services, and also use the data to make sure nothing is slipping through the cracks and that you are focusing on the things you actually have control over. So thank you for your time. And with that, I will pass it to Mike.
Thanks, Nick. A lot of great content there. Yes, a lot of the things Nick talked about, are kind of ways that we can strengthen our tech stack. So, I mean, we'll start first with payments and billing, and frankly, just offering prepay, right? If a customer pays for their services in advance, they're not going to get another bill for you for at least another, 6 months. We'll call it at a minimum, typically up here in the Midwest or Northeast. So that said, you're not banging them over the head with bills, past due notices, anything like that. They've already paid for their services, right? Furthermore, likely getting a discount for paying for those services in advance. And you've also decreased the likelihood that customer will churn, right? Again, they're not getting bills. They've already paid for their services. Great. We're happy. They're happy. So make sure you're offering prepay on eligible services. It doesn't have to be on all services. If you're running a landscape maintenance operation, probably don't want to, maybe allow folks to prepay for a season. But again, offered on the services that make sense or on your installment contracts. If you're offering installment contracts to your customers, right, where they're paying for those installments monthly, you can also offer prepay on that. No rules against that, right? So definitely a number of avenues, specifically with the RealGreen software, but in any software package, you should have the ability to offer prepay, capture prepay, report on who's prepaying, report on prepaid trends, offer different promotions with prepay, so on and so forth. So a lot of, I like that Nick mentioned sort of the basics, right? The blocking and tackling. I think that's one of them right there. Be good at that and you'll be successful. Sort of as we also talk about payments and billing, enrolling customers in auto pay and then installment contracts. Again, that just lessens the overhead required and sort of the leakage that might come with trying to recover your accounts receivable, right? So enroll someone in auto pay and you'll charge their card or run an ACH transaction anytime a service is performed. You couple that with installment contracts anytime the installment charge is fired off. So again, you can roll them into monthly contracts, right, and automatically charge their card, or process an ACH when that installment charge posts, right? You'll reduce your AR, you'll reduce the overhead in trying to recover and recoup, money from production that you've already done, and again, sunk marketing dollars into obtaining these customers, right? You're out and performing service for them. Last thing you want to do is be chasing the money that they owe you. And I think, as we talk about sort of, Nick mentioned setting that expectation up front, that's also something, you need to coach your customers on, specifically your new sales, right? You're entering into an agreement with them, right? You're performing service for them, right? And you'll be there every X amount of weeks or once a month to perform those services, right? Let them know it's their responsibility to pay for those services. And if they're unhappy with their service, it's up to them to call you, right? And you can run a service call or something like that. A consumer, expressing their frustration, right, in service shouldn't be them just stopping payment, right? They should be calling the office, or your call center, setting up a service call. And that's something that, again, you can certainly coach through or set that expectation with customers up front. It is an agreement, right? One thing we did touch about, and we can really, could spend the rest of the time talking about smart selling, but Service Assistant, our flagship product, does have the ability to sort of track condition codes and then offer those in terms of upsell. So if a technician's on a lawn, right, they see grubs are present, they see bare spots, things of that nature, technicians can mark those conditions, and then those can generate upsell opportunities. The trick here, and Joe mentioned it, Nick touched on it a little bit. So obviously you don't want to just be blanket upselling in times of uncertainty, right? Focus on the upsell opportunities that are going to matter to the customer, right? So if they've got some significant grub damage, that's probably something that you'd want to upsell them, right? But don't feel the need necessarily to force an upsellable service on every property. It might leave a bad taste in a consumer's mouth, right? Especially in times of economic uncertainty. Those that maybe haven't prepaid are probably already, getting a bill or you're charging their auto pay, charging their card automatically with auto pay, right? They're seeing bills come out, right? You may not want to be seeing, upsell opportunities come in. Separately, also you can manage that and should manage that through different residential accounts and commercial accounts, right? The ability to sort of limit who's seeing upsells, things of that nature. So keep all that in mind as you talk about upselling, right? And really focus on the upsells that are truly going to matter to that customer without overwhelming them with a constant request for more money every 32 days, right? And then, gosh, there's a ton of different opportunity here, as we look to become more efficient, right, and reduce our overhead in times of economic uncertainty. The name of the game there is, automation, and how do we optimize, right? So that we look at every single task that any persona in your business, right, runs. What's the job they're doing, and how can we try to optimize it, make it more efficient, or automate it? So things like automating your routing practices, right? Certainly would recommend you evaluate that, right? Try and take that route planner's job from 2 hours a day or an hour a day down to a matter of minutes, right? How can we optimize our communication preferences, right? How we communicate. Utilize tools that provide automated communications, right? RealGreen's got that, collection of those in our portfolio, right? But you don't necessarily want someone in your office, sitting down and, performing a bunch of call aheads ahead of time if they don't have to, right? Utilize automated communications to solve those problems or to help them get those jobs done. Separately, Nick talked a little bit about data and watching the data. And that is something that I know I wholeheartedly agree, and any successful business is going to have to evaluate, but certainly being in tune with not only what's going on in your business, right? From a tactical standpoint, what are the services that we need to get done? What are the services that are lagging behind? What did we miss, right? Who are our debtors? But also trends, right? And specifically trends within marketing, right? We're seeing an increase or a decrease in certain areas. We're seeing an increase or a decrease among certain, service lines, things of that nature. Joe mentioned, not just mass blanketing an entire zip code, but really getting down to the subdivision level or the neighborhood level, which can certainly make you more efficient, boost your close rate, and also conserve your marketing spend. So all out of that data and review, we want to optimize that and automate that as best we can or as fast as we can, right? What's working, what's not working, both from operations reporting, but also sort of trend analytics, if you will. So a lot of great points on there, but really take a step back and look at all the jobs and all the hats that a lot of your staff wear, and look at how we can give them tools to help their help them perform their jobs easier, right? And with that, we can open it up for just a roundtable questions. Joe, Nick, I'll also ask you if there's anything else you want to touch on or anything else you'd like to share. We certainly got the time. Other than that, we could turn it over to the group for any questions.
Mike, I think, one of the things we talked about mentioning, and I don't know if we really covered very well or not, was in economic downturns, when you start doing marketing to your customers, right? One of the things that I've seen be very successful is you continue that communication, whether it's, bulletins to the customers, informational content, right? Don't make every communication a sale, right? Then when you see a condition on the property, because you talked about conditions, property conditions and upselling there, you notice there's a grub problem. You upsell to that grub problem. Now the customer is more likely to buy that because you haven't blanketed them continually with sales messages, right? When you introduce some of that other content, just information stuff, then they tend to read more of your stuff because they're not turned off by every communication being a sales piece, right? And so in times of, economic downturn, again, this becomes more important because now you're selling the value, right? And back to, hey, this customer is, they're concerned about their finances. They're not going on vacation. They're doing a staycation. They want their property to look good. They're worried about their home value. Well, the house looks better. It's gonna be more valuable, right? So now suddenly this service that you're upselling adds value to the property. It's not just a sale for the sake of a sales reach, right? And I think that's, it's a big distinction, and it's hard to spend the money on, sending out communications when you know that there's not necessarily going to be an immediate return. The return on those type of communications is that stronger relationship with the customer, better retention, and like Nick pointed out, reach out to your customer, ask them what's going on, and make sure that when a customer responds with something that you follow up and you address any issues that you identify.
Yeah, I agree completely. We have some locations that sort of independently opt into sending like a newsletter out, right? And they just email blast their active customers with this newsletter, and it's just timely and relevant information. Grub season's coming up, or seed season, or last year, we had an army worm and infestation this time last year. So and it's truly just informational, and the customers really do appreciate that. And then even going back to like the property evaluations, I always trained people, do not check every available upsell on there and push everything to them. You need to be surgical about it, and like just recommend the 2 or 3 things that would most benefit their lawn. You don't want to overload them with information. It's got to be real, and it's got to be relevant. It's important to we always say over communicate, but when it comes to salesy type things, I think you can definitely over communicate to a negative, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nick. I'm glad you touched on like even that transaction, right? That service out there. Utilize condition codes, not, outside of upsells, but, got dull mower blades, or, looks like you're
mowing too high, too low, whatever.
Exactly. Yep. Because those types of informative, condition codes are only going to help your customer have a better lawn, which is going to keep them on board longer. So yeah, great call out, Joe.
You always want to stress that as well, like it's from the point, either the first point of sale or the first time you meet the customer. This is a partnership, and for my stuff to work as well as it could, there are things that you're gonna have to do to help it along. And then, that's going to be mowing and watering and et cetera. We know all of the things, but you got to kind of put it back on them a little bit. And I think if you do run into a situation where this lawn is not going to improve within the time frame they want it to, you need to say that. And if that person ends up canceling right there and then so be it. You haven't wasted product and labor on that lawn. And any company that customer goes to is probably going to think the same thing. Some people just don't get it, and it's all about the education. And even when you educate them, sometimes you can tell it's still not going to be a good partnership. But I'd rather get that out of the way early, for sure.
Good. Yeah, great call out. One thing I also wanted to touch base on, right, as we look at profitability, you also have, right, with price increases, right, and times of economic uncertainty, price increases might not be everyone's cup of tea, obviously, but also you can think of price increases, and this is one thing that we've talked about in separate sessions. Price increases can be a way to help right size your customer base, right? If you get someone who's way outside on the end of the territory, right, who is really cutting into your overhead because of the travel time, or maybe it's a difficult property conditions, or maybe they just plumb have a locked gate every time you go out there and you got to send another technician or crew out. right? Price increases, might be an opportunity there, or are an opportunity here on those
Soft
types
way
of
to
customers.
cancel them. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
soft way to
exactly.
or make it worth your time to go out there. Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
And we do have some questions for the audience if you want those. This one's for Nick. What's helped your franchisees keep their crews around longer and stopped constant turnover?
Oh boy, that's the $1 million question almost. I think we train our locations to always be recruiting, even if you feel like your staff's full and production's getting done on time or ahead of time, like if a good person shows up and you should absolutely talk to them and vet them out because people are always leaving. This is a seasonal business if you're not in the South. People have that downtime over the winter and they find other jobs, and they're willing to sacrifice their unemployment or whatever benefit they're on. And they go look for another position, and sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't. So you always got to be recruiting. And if it's a group of people or an individual that you truly do not want to leave, if they're sort of essential to your production or whatever, find something for them to do off season. Even the guys that get a full winter up here, they spend all winter refurbishing their equipment, and they go through every truck and every piece of equipment, and we're changing oil. I mean, they're doing everything. And if you've got a lot of trucks, that's a pretty big lift. So having someone to do that is good. I also like I guess the best way to say it is dangling the carrot in front of them. If they're that good of an employee, then you should start thinking about elevating them to a different position. And I think you should talk to people about that. And sometimes that'll keep someone around, knowing there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't have to be a technician my entire life. I can take the step up at some point. Many years back, we tried Indeed out, and we bought it for all the locations for a year, and it's mixed results. I think it seemed pretty regional. Some people thought it worked amazing, and then some people said they barely got any bites whatsoever. But there's a lot of technology out there now that can help you, to put your hiring ad out in front of people. But yeah, you always have to be looking. Honestly, the last 2 or 3 years, probably since the pandemic, it seems like hiring has, or retention, I should say, has gotten better. I haven't heard from my owners as much. Yeah, there's a few outliers here and there, but for the most part, it seems like people are keeping their employees, which is a great sign. And everybody's motivated by something differently. So you can't blanket one thing across your entire crew. You have to talk to them and you have to find out what motivates them. Some people it's going to be money. Some people it's going to be just time off. And you cater to that how you can. You got to talk to your people for sure.
And then another one, I think this is just for you as well. What data or reports should we be tracking for forecasting the rest of the season?
I mean, as I said, the season summary is the Bible for us. It's important. You want people to be looking at that every few days, in my opinion. Some people look at it weekly. Some people probably just look at it when they're cleaning up the end of each round. And some people don't even do that, unfortunately. And you get to the end of the year and you go to route your work, and where are all my round sevens or whatever your final app of the year is? Where are they? I don't have any to print. Well, run your season summary. Oh, they're still stuck in round 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, that is the most important thing to run. And then obviously you get the detail of those groups of customers from the unserviced list. And yeah, you got to keep everybody current, whether you're skipping applications out or whatever. Having that top line revenue be as accurate as possible to the present is extremely important. Extremely.
And then what's your gut check? Invest in growth right now or play it safe and lock in efficiency?
I mean, you should always be reinvesting in your business. It's a matter of where you're pointing it, I think. And you've got to have the data to say, hey, we're throwing marketing in this area and it's not working, but we're throwing marketing into this area and it is working. Well, then you go in on that area. I think it was mentioned, neighbors were mentioned. You know, we do a thing where we send new neighbor postcards to every new sale, and we send them, you know, if the house is here, we send 10 that way and we send 10 that way. And that's all about creating density. And, you know, after spring's over, a lot of people turn those off. And I'm like, you're still making sales all year long. You are. Yeah, it's not like it was in the spring, but you're still making sales. So why would you not want to still try to create density for the rest of the year if you can? They're cheap postcards. They're the cheapest sales you'll get all year long. I would say reinvest where it makes sense. Absolutely.
And then what's the 20% of your marketing that is getting 80% of the results for you?
It's probably our main marketing effort, which we call the IMC, the Integrated Mail Campaign. It's a big part of the year every year, and we take a whole week, all of us business consultants, and we block it out completely, and we don't do anything but lock these mail campaigns, and each one of them is a phone call with the franchise owner and them telling us where they want to throw the mail and us telling them where it's working or not working. And they can be long discussions. Obviously, budget is key. You know, they're all going to have a budget. So it's about spending that as wisely as possible. I mean, without the predictability of those conversion rates, we probably wouldn't be able to do business planning and cash flow projection the way we do. It is very consistent year to year. We know if you put X in, you're going to get X out. And that allows us to do these business plans and these forecasts to really identify red flags coming throughout the year. You know, you want to be a fortune teller. You absolutely want it.
What do you feel is an average customer retention rate?
Is this for me?
Yeah,
I'd
I believe
say,
so.
honestly, I start shaking or twitching a little bit whenever I see it get worse than 20%, you know. I think at Spring Green as a whole right now, we're about 18%. But there's definitely people who retain 90% of their customers every year. And there's others that, you know, just churn them in and out. And it's all about service and communication. But my benchmark is typically if you're doing better than 20%, you're pretty good. You're doing good. And if you're worse than 20%, then you got a leaky bucket there somewhere. You got something you got to fix.
Okay. And then this is something I think you mentioned in the presentation. What do you send to the 10 neighbors? Is it a postcard to say your neighbor just signed up for service? I think they're looking for the example.
Yeah, it is a postcard like that. I don't know if it says your neighbor signed up for service. I think it's a little bit more generic than that. But typically we know these neighbors are talking to each other for the most part. And we can whittle that 1 to 10 down a little bit, because if you're in a rural area, I mean, 10 houses down could be miles and miles and miles. So yeah, you want to obviously pay attention to where or what the source of that, where that's coming from, what part of town that's coming from. But I think it's just a typical promotional thing. We hope that, you know, that customer is going to see the flag on the lawn when the lawn's completed, and there's going to be some word of mouth there, and they convert enough to well enough to the point where I try not to let my franchise owners turn them off. I tell them you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot if you turn it off. You're gonna lose sales that are where your customers are, which seems silly.
What advice would you give to independent lawn care business owners who are trying to maintain value or still trying to sell right now? That's for Nick as well.
I would say look at you want to provide the best look to any potential buyer as possible. And the pitfalls I see with that are bad financials, meaning your QuickBooks, your P&Ls are inconsistent, and they don't tell a story, or they don't tell a good story. So you want to make sure those are as clean as possible. And even if they look bad, you want them to be consistent, and you want it to tell a story. Oh, they look bad because of this. And this is something that the new person could come in and change, hopefully pretty easily. That's gigantic. I would say look at your net revenue per customer. And if you're still on the fence about selling, yeah, I mean, price increase and making your customers worth as much as possible is gigantic. You know, it's surprising. We will run, you know, the price increase utility, and you know what, it adds 20K, 50K to your top line, or even more. And you know, we've done studies at Spring Green where we randomly give customers no price increase. Some of them get 3%, some of them get 10. And the difference between all of those, retention wise, is negligible. If you're providing a service that shows value and that they value, they're going to keep your service. So I guess those are the two things my mind initially goes to.
And then I think this is for Nick as well. How do you ensure consistency and profitability across multiple locations during uncertain times?
I think you need to look at everything separate. You know, we've got a lot of different divisions over here, and you can't roll them all together. You know, it's not comparing apples to apples. You almost need to look at them individually, and you know, and identify whether it's working for this one but not working for this one, but it's working for this one. And then I would be cross promoting like crazy. Again, we have these customer lists of people we either do lawn care for, or we do irrigation for, or whatever. You know, we already know that that's a buyer. So why would you not work those lists before you, or get someone on the phone and calling those people before you just blanket send a mail piece to, you know, probably 75% of the people that you're sending it to are probably not even a buyer. So work the people you have and cross promote is what I would say.
All right, well, that does it for the questions. Was there anything else that you three wanted to add before we wrap it up here? All good? All
Yeah,
right.
specifically, thanks again, everybody. That's all.
Yeah,
Yep.
and if you didn't get a question answered, we can follow up and we'll send it to Nick, Mike, or Joe. And then as far as like I said earlier, a link to this webinar will be in your inbox in about a week. It'll be on lawnandlandscape.com as well. So keep an eye out for that. Guys, thank you for doing this today, and thank you everyone for attending. Everyone have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Everyone.